Thank you all for coming out today. We have one more month of session in this legislative year, and I think it's important that we emphasize protecting our state's natural resources. That's why I've asked some of my colleagues to come up here and members of the environmental community to express their support for our environment. I'd like to thank Assistant Majority Leader Michael Allen and my colleague Roger Dickinson from Sacramento, who are co-sponsors of the legislation we're going to discuss today, AB 591, on hydraulic fracturing, or fracking, as it's commonly called. But there are also many others, in addition to those who are gathered here today, who support this cause. I understand that roughly 50,000 Californians have signed online petitions expressing their support for passing AB 591 and protecting the state's environment. They all agree with us that it's time to pull back the curtain and shed some more light on fracking. AB 591 will ensure that state regulators at the Division of Oil and Gas are gathering important information about the process called hydraulic fracturing. Fracking is a technique in which water, sand, and chemical additives are injected into the underground strata to cause cracks that allow hydrocarbons to flow more easily. While we think that that's a good idea for resource recovery, we're worried about the effect it has on the environment and also the lack of information. The oil and gas industry is telling us that California is on the cusp of an unconventional oil and gas boom because of recent advancements in enhanced recovery techniques, including the use of fracking. The Monterey Shale formation, which crosses 13 coastal and inland counties, is being touted as the largest and richest shale play in the United States of America. Let me say that again. The Monterey Shale formation, which extends along 13 coastal and inland counties, is being touted as the largest and richest shale play in the United States. Some petroleum engineers and geologists also view the gas sands and shale in northern Sacramento Valley fields as increasingly promising and suitable for fracking. The bill will serve to provide the public, property owners, and water purveyors with important information. AB 591 is intended to keep regulators ahead of the increased use of hydraulic fracturing so that we don't experience water quality and other problems that have occurred in Pennsylvania, Texas, and Wyoming. Currently, when oil producers notify the state of their intent to drill, they are not required to provide any information, zero, regarding these production techniques or the chemicals that they're going to use. So AB 591 does three basic things. First, it requires that the oil operators provide a complete list of chemicals used in fracking. Second, it requires the operator to disclose how much water they're going to use. And third, it requires the operator to disclose how much of the contaminated water they pulled back and what they did with the contaminated water. It's an important public disclosure bill, period, and it lets Californians know what is being pumped into these wells. It's within keeping with our state's rich environmental legacy, and I look forward for it moving through the legislature and onto the governor's desk. So now I would like to introduce a great voice of our environment, my colleague in the Assembly, Assemblymember Roger Dickinson. Roger?
Thanks, Bob, and thanks for authoring this significant piece of legislation. The time has come to bring fracking out into the light of day. There are numerous areas, as Assemblymember Weickowski noted, of Northern California that produce natural gas, and industry reports have indicated that Northern California gas sands are suitable for hydraulic fracturing. Sad to say, state regulators have no idea exactly what's going on out there because they don't track hydraulic fracturing. It takes place and operators don't disclose to state regulators or the public what chemicals are being injected into the ground when this process is undertaken. Given the potential threats to our groundwater, which we rely on so heavily here in the Sacramento Valley and throughout Northern California, we simply cannot accept this as the status quo. The public has a right to know. A recent report released last week by the Secretary of Energy recommends that regulatory entities immediately develop rules to require disclosure of all chemicals used in hydraulic fracturing fluids on both public and private lands. The report further stated that disclosure should include all chemicals and that they should be reported on a well-by-well basis on a publicly available website that includes tools for searching by geography. This may seem to be simply common sense, but it doesn't exist today. Assembly Bill 591 would implement these regulations and bring common sense to bear. The public has a right to know what chemicals are being introduced into the environment, especially when it could potentially threaten our drinking water. Our drinking water. Regulators should be monitoring this increasingly widely used technology. I'm extremely pleased to be co-authoring this very, very critical piece of legislation and look forward to working with Mr. Weickowski, Mr. Allen, my colleagues in the both Assembly and State Senate to make sure that we pass this important piece of public health legislation. And I want to thank so many members of the environmental community who are here behind us today and throughout the state of California who have recognized just how important this undertaking is to our public health. Thanks very much.
Let me introduce the third co-author. It's my pleasure to share with you the Assistant Majority Floor Leader, Mr. Michael Allen.
Good morning, all of you. Whenever my colleagues invoke that phrase about common sense, I always think about Mark Twain and common sense not being so common. This particular bill, and Roger's discussed this, and Bob as well, we cannot emphasize too much that the public's right to know is behind a lot of the legislation we do so that we can make informed choices going forward. How are we going to be able to know what is happening with our geologic formations when we're pumping these solvents into the ground? At times they use radioactive tracers, and it's important that we are able to find out the data. Now, one thing I want to emphasize is that this data is already created. The oil companies, the petroleum producers have this already available internally. So what we're asking them to do is to share their internal data to the regulatory agencies so we can know exactly what's being pumped into the ground. With this fracking technology, it's still new. We don't know whether or not there's other unintended consequences besides possible pollution, such as seismic activity in some areas where it may well be due to the fracturing of these formations. So when Bob told me about this bill, I said, Bob, I absolutely want to be on this because I'll give you an example. This year in session, we had a bill that would have allowed the public to know about genetically modified organisms, the frankenfish, I called it, for salmon and for other fish to be marketed. That bill, unfortunately, never saw the light of day or the governor's desk because there seemed to be interest in not having the public be aware that they were purchasing that. To me, the principle is, and we can't say this too much, that we who are doing the public business owe it to you to let you know what is being done by industry and whether it's safe or not, and essentially what the effects are on the environment. So I want to thank Assemblymember Weickowski so much for introducing this bill, my colleague Roger Dickinson for being supportive. Thank you.
Our next speaker has put a lot of time and energy, and I mean a lot of time, into this bill and has pushed it from the start. When Bill Elliott came to my office, Ben Turner, my staff, and I, the three of us sat down. Renee was there with the Environmental Working Group, and we sat down and talked about it, and we continue to talk about it. So let me introduce you Bill Elliott with the Environmental Working Group.
Thank you. EWG, or the Environmental Working Group, has worked on fracking back east for a couple of years, centered around the Marcellus Shale Formation, where there are a lot of problems going on with people's drinking water, methane reaching their taps, people getting sick. So we said, are we fracking in California? The first thing I did, obviously, was go to the website of the Division of Oil and Gas and could find nothing about fracking except a real basic fact sheet, which wasn't very factual. So that led us to do our own investigation, and we found a lot of data and press releases, technical papers from the industry itself, who have been open in the past, and also in these hearings on Mr. Weickowski's bill, saying, yes, we frack. We've fracked for over 40 years in California, mainly for oil, not gas. but they're open about that, and yet our Division of Oil and Gas couldn't tell us anything about it. So that's what this bill is all about, is getting that data to Division of Oil and Gas so that we, the public, and the regulators can look at it and know where it's occurring. Luckily, we don't have the horror stories they're seeing in Texas, Colorado, Pennsylvania, New York, of polluted wells, sick people. But on the other hand, we don't know if someone's groundwater was polluted by fracking because we don't know where it's occurred. So this will give us basic data so that if a swarm of earthquakes happens in the future, we can map that with wells that are fracked. If there's groundwater pollution, not just in someone's drinking water, but in agricultural water used for irrigating our important California crops, we would have a way to look back and see where and what chemicals, what they did with the water. So that's why AB 591 is important. It'll bring transparency to this issue, and fracking has been going on since 1953 in California. In fact, the world's record frack occurred in Kern County in 1993. Chevron Oil boasted about that, and that's probably been surpassed since then, but it gives you an idea that fracking is not new to California at all. We just need to catch up and get ahead of it, so if there are new plays, as they call them, into new formations, we're ready to regulate them and understand where they are and what chemicals are being used. Thank you.
Representing Clean Water Action, our next speaker is Ms. Lori Chen.
Good morning. Clean Water Action in California is 85,000 people who care about your water. Today, 16 million Californians rely on groundwater to drink, bathe, and other use for other human needs. Today, much of our agriculture industry will rely on this groundwater to irrigate crops that feed both the world and our economy. Today's water future is uncertain. This makes this bill even more important, and we really hope that you will all get behind it, and thank Mr. Weickowski for carrying this. This is just completely important for the future of our water. Thank you.
I'd like to introduce another great environmental advocate, Justin Milan of the League of Conservation Voters. Justin.
Thank you, sir. Good morning. The League of Conservation Voters enthusiastically supports this measure. It is a modest measure by nature. We're asking only for disclosure. This is a preventative measure. It's going to protect our groundwater, and it could also protect millions or billions of dollars in cleanup, as we've done in the past. We've allowed this type of contamination to occur, and then after the fact, spend taxpayers' dollars cleaning up the mess. This bill will have the disclosure we need to regulate, in addition, if there is any additional regulation necessary, but also to prevent any further contamination of our precious water resources. Thank you.
At this time, I'd like to invite Victoria Rome from the Natural Resources Defense Council to talk about her group's effort on the fracking issue.
Good morning. I'm Victoria Rome with the Natural Resources Defense Council. Because of gaping loopholes in federal law, fracking is not regulated under the Federal Safe Drinking Water Act. The large volumes of waste fluid are not treated as hazardous waste, even though the waste may be quite toxic. Communities in California, at a minimum, have a right to know what chemicals are being used and stored in our neighborhoods. Because of the way that property rights work, sometimes fracking could occur right in someone's backyard. California should be a leader on this issue. AB 591 takes an important step to provide basic information about the fracking process. Thank you.
Our last speaker is Mr. Tim O'Connell from the Environmental Defense Fund. EDF is working on fracking legislation in numerous states and in Washington, D.C. Tim?
Thank you. Environmental Defense Fund is on President Obama's task force on fracking that's looking at a lot of the areas that Ms. Rome just spoke about. We've also seen legislation coming up in numerous states. And as we've had this conversation mature, the industry's come to the table and said that they're ready, willing, and able to release this information to the public because it's in their best benefit to make sure that people know that fracking can be done safely and effectively. We support California joining this emerging national conversation, one which is going to be very important to protect the public health and the environment throughout our state in the years to come. Thank you.
Thank you to all the speakers and their organizations for coming to show their support on this important legislation. I want to thank once again the 50,000 people who have signed the petitions, as well as the Courage Campaign, Credo, and Democracy for America. This bill is the first step in getting more information to the regulator and ensuring that the public has access to information that could potentially